From Global's newsroom, Israel and Iran have accepted a ceasefire plan proposed by President Trump to end their 12-day war. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned he will respond forcefully to any violation of the truce. A final wave of Iranian strikes killed at least 4 people in southern Israel overnight. The Cabinet Office Minister, Pat McFadden, has told Nick that Tehran must now halt its nuclear programme.
I hope the ceasefire holds. It's always a fragile situation in the Middle East, but if it does hold, it still leaves the question of what happens to Iran's nuclear programme in the long term, and that must be resolved.
Security experts have warned US businesses in Britain could be at risk of attacks by Iran. Counter-terror experts have told LBC that Tehran could be considering more hostile activity on UK soil. Sir Keir Starmer is to join NATO allies in promising to increase defence spending to 5% of GDP by 2035. Leaders are due to head to the Netherlands later to formally agree the alliance's new target. It includes 3.5% of core funding and 1.5% on security-related investment. LBC's political editor, Natasha Clark, says it'll incorporate a broader range of spending.
That's expected to include money on tackling small boats, on making energy, on potentially even building things like roads and railways. That is now going to be included in our defence spending. This is all because of Donald Trump. He has called on everybody to spend 5%, and NATO bosses have been frantically behind the scenes trying to make this work.
More than 100 Labour MPs have joined a fresh attempt to block Sir Keir Starmer's welfare reforms. They've signed an amendment that could halt the plans. Ministers say the changes, which could save up to £5 billion, are fair and will stop people being written off. And England's cricketers need another 350 runs to beat India on the final day of the first test at Headingley. The hosts will resume this morning on 21 without loss in their pursuit of 371 runs. In the city, the FTSE 100's just reopening at 87.58. The pound buys $1.35 and a euro 16. LBC weather largely cloudy and breezy today with rain in the west, drier further east. A high of 26 Celsius. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Thomas Watts.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call the Commissioner. Put your calls to Sir Mark Rowley now. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC.
Yeah, good morning. It's 2 minutes after 8. It's Tuesday, June the 24th, and the Commissioner is here, the country's most senior police officer, Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Sir Mark Rowley. Good to have you on board, Sir Mark. Now, in the first hour, you may well have been on your way to the studios. We played out a report from my colleague, LBC's Helen Hoddenott, working on something called Operation Cuff. What is it it's seeking to do? How is it working? How successful are you? Do you want to roll it out across other boroughs? And morning. Thanks for coming, Commissioner.
Good morning, Nick. Always good to see you. So over the last couple of years, we put 500 more officers into neighbourhood policing to fight crime locally, tackle the issues that matter to people, and Operation Cuff is one example of what's going on. It's a truism that a few offenders commit most crime. If you can capture those, you can have a massive effect. And what they've been doing there in Wood Green, I heard your piece earlier.
Oh, you did? Good. Yeah.
Is tackling those offenders that are having the biggest impact on shoplifting, working with shopkeepers. They were doing some covert operations there, as you reported. Yep. That's fantastic. Similar operation in Orpington we've been doing. Team there arrested 13 prolific shoplifters, and shoplifting in Orpington went down by 70%. 13 people reduced it by 17%. And I'm out this afternoon in Mitcham, where excellent officer there, PC Taylor's been doing some work where we've actually shown that some of the shop theft is being driven by other retail premises reselling high-value goods from big stores. And he went through a whole process where they used the smart water property marking. Yes. That sort of has a unique marker. They spent time with the shops marking loads of property in the big stores selling the high value goods, and then a few days later did warrants at I think a dozen or so off licenses, and all but one of them they had stolen gear. They've recovered 150,000 stolen gear. Those places will now have their licenses challenging, so you're breaking the market for it. So this is all about challenging crime locally.
And is it likely to be rolled out across the whole of the city? I mean, obviously, this is a fair deployment of personnel, isn't it?
Well, and that's what we put the extra resources in neighbourhoods for, because they know what the issues are. It's not always shoplifting. In another town centre, they've been focused on drug supply. There's some of the market stalls selling drugs, and they've been doing that because that's driving crime in the area. So there's different priorities. And one of the things we want to talk about today, Nick, we've got a new tool online called Met Engage. People can
This launches, I believe, now, doesn't it?
Launches now. It's a way to get more information about what your local police are doing for you in your area. It's also a way for you to feedback your concerns and what you think the priorities could be. So if you're worried about, antisocial behaviour outside the local shops or whatever it is, let the local police know, and the neighbourhood teams, that's what they're there to do, to tackle the things as you see them in your area.
And how does one engage with Met Engage?
So it's you log on, you register, and you tell us how you want to receive information.
So it's on the Met website?
Yes, and how do you want to receive information? Do you want to receive it by email? Do you want to receive it on WhatsApp? So it gives you a route to receive that information, and you probably hope that you get 1 or 2 updates a week in terms of what's going on. I saw one recently on a shoplifting case that went out to a sort of local community, that an officer who was on patrol was dealing with a driver who had no insurance, spotted a shoplifter, grabbed him, and he put that on there saying, I know you've all been concerned about shoplifting at local shops, this is what we're doing today. So it keeps you posted. So you might not see your officer on the beat because you're at work or you're sat in your home office study.
Right.
But we can keep you posted what we're doing, and you can feed back to us and tell us what you want.
Well, since we last spoke, I've had experience with some of your men and women and the neighbourhood team in Lewisham Borough. They helped me for a missing vehicle. They couldn't have been more diligent, so credit to the men and women that I work with there. OK, your headphones are on, Commissioner, so let's go to the first caller. Tabitha's in Bournemouth. Tabitha, you're on the radio. Go ahead. Morning, Tabitha.
Good morning. I'd like to ask for Rowley, given that we know the IRGC is active here in the UK, and that they are the puppeteer pulling the strings of the big groups like Palestine Action, is he going to urge the government to prescribe the IRGC?
This is, of course, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. They're openly supportive of groups such as Hamas and Hezbollah. Both have been prescribed, as has Palestine Action as well. Commissioner.
Thank you for the question. Thanks, Nick. So prescription is a decision made by the Home Secretary. She does it on the information put to her by the intelligence agencies and by police. So it's up to her whether to prescribe IRGC, and I'm not going to sort of express a view on that. I think that's wrong for me to put my view over hers.
Has evidence been sent to the Home Secretary?
I'm not going to discuss the process, I'm sorry. But so on Palestine Action, which she has spoken about the intent to prescribe, they're not yet prescribed, but she's spoken about the intent on the back of them being a sort of organised, serious criminal and extremist group who've assaulted officers. They've committed mass amounts of criminal damage. There's many ongoing cases. They claimed responsibility for the attack on the airbase and the aircraft in last week. So I know some people talk about this being direct action protest. That's a sort of euphemism for criminality. Yesterday, we had 2 protests about the events in the Middle East. They couldn't have been more different. You had Stop the War yesterday evening protesting near the American embassy. They have a view about American foreign policy. They protested. It was perfectly civilised and they expressed their point of view. That's what a democracy is about. Conversely, earlier on yesterday in Trafalgar Square, because we kept them away from Parliament, Trafalgar Square, Palestine Action protested and caused all sorts of difficulties. We had, and then they made 13 arrests, 6 for assaulting police officers. 4 of the officers were injured, fortunately none of them seriously. What
does that tell us about Palestine Action in your view, Commissioner?
As I've said, they are sort of organised criminal extremist group. That's very clear to me.
But can't I say the same about the IRGC?
So they're based in Iran. That's a matter for government whether they're going to prescribe a part of the Iranian government, and I'm not going to express a view on that. But you have heard us talk previously about national security threats. We've disrupted well into double figures of plots directed by the Iranian state on the UK shores in the last couple of years, and those have been spoken about regularly.
Have the numbers increased recently?
There's been a steady flow of them over the last 2 years.
But over the last, say, 6 months?
I can't drag those figures out of my head, Nick, sorry.
When we hear Cabinet Minister Jonathan Reynolds say the threat of Iranian attacks in the UK will increase in the wake of the US bombing of Tehran, do you concur?
That's his opinion. I'm not going to give off-the-cuff sort of security advice on here, but the fact we've had double figures of plots foiled in the last couple of years is indicative of a significant threat.
Have you had to step up resources in this area?
So if I look at the counter-terrorism policing teams who work closely with MI5 and the other parts of the security world who are hosted by the Metropolitan Police, and a few years ago I was leading that.
Yes.
When I was leading that sort of 7-8 years ago, it was a very small part of the work was related to state threats. Most of it was about terrorism, ISIS and extreme right-wing groups. Now it's a big proportion of the work in that place is about state threats and you'll have seen cases reported in the paper involving
there's some active investigations where
Chinese state, Russian state, Iranian state, and that work continues.
Just lastly, on the Palestine action protest yesterday, the Met has been accused of two-tier policing after forcing 2 Jewish men to hide on a bus at the demo. The pro-Palestinian protest group clashed with police, as you rightly said, Commissioner, in Trafalgar Square. 2 Jewish counter-protesters were told to hide inside a double-decker bus as the mob chanted Zionist scum. The Daily Telegraph reports that they have video showing police warning them that waving an Israeli flag could be a breach of the peace. Is that correct, Commissioner?
So this is a couple of individuals being disingenuous in what they're saying there. They chose to walk into the middle of the Palestine action protest and then reveal the Israeli flags. Just as if you were a Spurs fan and walked into the middle of a bunch of Arsenal fans on a heated local derby and then started waving Spurs flags, the police would hoik you out of there, wouldn't they, and say, don't be so damn stupid, you're going to start a fight. And they'd take them out of there for their own protection. It's no different to that whatsoever. It's not about two-tier policing. If they'd wanted to protest on the other side of the road and express their view, the officers would have facilitated that. But if you want to walk into the middle of something to try and create an incident, then, of course, we're going to try and protect you from yourselves and stop an incident growing. And we would do exactly the same in the opposite. If you had a pro-Israel protest going on and a couple of Palestinian supporters walked into the middle of it and waved flags, we'd hoik them out of it as well.
Can I suggest this is almost deliberate provocation then of your officers in a sense?
Yeah, and so officers have acted with great common sense and sort of and pragmatism. And it's if people want us to, and you'll have seen these big protests, and we set up counter-protest points where at a safe distance people can shout at each other and express their views and express their democratic right. But we're not going to allow one side to walk into the middle of the other to try and spark an incident. That's just irresponsible.
Let's go to more calls. Gemma's in Guildford. Gemma, you're through to the Commissioner. Go ahead, Gemma. Good morning.
Morning, Nick. Morning, boss. I used to work with you in Surrey.
Oh, good. Good to see you. Hopefully it's a friendly question then.
No, it doesn't mean I'm going to go easy on you.
No, Gemma, go for the Commissioner, or the Chief Constable as he was. Go on.
No, he's a nice guy.
That's a good start.
What I'm kind of worried about is we've seen cuts over the years so many times, and we're already down to the bone. How on earth is this going to look to the public? Because I've looked at your 7-point plan, and I can see that, you're going to invest a lot in the neighbourhood side and whatever, and I can see where you're going to try and make cuts and etc. But how is this going to look, and how are you going to get the trust back from people knowing that the services are stripped to the bone? And we've got people already frightened to go out of their homes because of knife crime and violence and everything else that's going on.
Gemma, thank you. Commissioner, just to remind listeners, I have a figure here. The Met is facing a black hole of £260 million.
So that was... so let's do a couple of facts on budget first, and I'll come to that question. Thanks. Was it Nikki?
Jimmy. Gemma.
Thanks, Gemma. So let's do a couple of facts on budget. So we had a really big budget gap last year. The Mayor and the Home Secretary found a bit of extra money, so it wasn't as bad as we expected, but we're still shrinking. So by the time we get to the end of this year, as in sort of as we head towards March next year, over 3 years, the Met will have shrunk by 3,300 people. That's a mixture of officers and staff in an organisation that's about 44,000. So that's a big chunk of people. About half of that loss is this year, half was over the previous 2 years. That is a real struggle for the organisation. We're having to get more focused and more choosy on what we do and what we don't do. And you'll have seen us talking about tough choices publicly about where we're trimming those resources from. What we're trying to do, and obviously you've worked in policing, Gemma, and we're sort of a can-do service. we want to succeed, but we're going to have to succeed on a narrower front and be really clear about what matters most of all. So areas like we were talking about today, like neighbourhood policing and tackling those those crimes that matter to local people. Crime down in local areas is down by 18% in terms of the volume of crime on things like burglary and vehicle crime and theft from person, by focusing on that. Likewise, we've been focusing on violence against women and girls and making great progress there in solving more crimes and protecting people. But these tough choices are going to continue into the future, and that's a real challenge for us. So
you talk about these tough choices, but someone said that he sees it as abhorrent defeatism, telling the public we can't do X or Y, that it's all too difficult. Do you know who said that, Commissioner? Sir Stephen Watson, who's the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester. He seems to take a rather different view. What would you say to him?
His officers are focusing on fighting crime like mine are. So policing over the years have picked up all sorts of extra functions and extra responsibilities. It's Steve's job and my job to make sure we're focused as much as possible on crime.
But you don't hear him saying he can't do certain things.
He's also not leading an organisation which is shrinking massively as well. So
he's only got 8,000 officers.
So we're focusing...
If you want to compare figures, should we talk about total crime? Total crime in Manchester, or theft, I'm so sorry, theft is down 28% in Manchester. In London, it's up 41%.
Yeah, it's not. So crime this year is down 18%. The neighbourhood crime where you are...
Theft down. So theft in Manchester down 28% with 8,000 men and women. Theft in London up 41%. Crime seems to be doing the better job.
Nick, crime where people live, where people work, is down 18% in terms of the local crime measures. We are arresting more than 1,000 people more every month than we were a year ago. The reporting of shoplifting, we've encouraged shops who were underreporting it to report more of it for operations like today, where we can tackle them and make a really big difference. And so they're reporting more of it, we're tackling more of it. We've more than doubled the number of shoplifting offences that have been prosecuted this year. We are bearing down in crime and succeeding massively, and you're just picking some random mischievous statistics out to stir things up.
It's not random, Commissioner.
No, you're picking some random statistics out and you're not explaining them. We've encouraged shops to report more theft to us because then we can tackle it. And you've heard an incident today where officers are doing that.
But they're not doing that in Manchester then, you don't think?
No, I'm not saying they're not. I'm saying we're doing similar things. We're tackling crime in the area. That's why you're safer on the streets of London than you were last year, with 18% less vehicle crime, theft from people, burglaries. So far this year, that's a big reduction. 1 in 5 less.
Down 6.5 in London. Vehicle crime down. Yes, you're absolutely right. Well, talking about how people feel safe, you may have seen the story concerning the broadcaster Selena Scott, who says that she was attacked and robbed by a gang in London last week. She heard you were coming on the show, Commissioner, so she filed this voice note.
Hello, Sir Mark. It's Selena Scott here. I don't know whether you heard what happened to me outside Waterstones in Piccadilly last week, when I was mugged by a gang who hit me with a metal object at the back of my leg before ripping open my bag and taking all my debit cards and cash. They sauntered off in the direction of the Ritz, and there was nothing I could do about it. There were too many of them, and there were no police anywhere. So I'm feeling today humiliated and angry, but most of all fearful for all those who are listening to Nick's show and feel that they can walk the streets of London safely, because I'm telling you, they can't. So here's my question. Why, when you can put police on the streets whenever anyone wants to shout their head off on a march, yet you can't patrol the centre of London to protect thousands of people like me? And don't tell me you rely on CCTV, because I understand the camera outside Waterstones, where I got mugged, not only wasn't functioning, it had been out of order for over a year.
Selena Scott, Commissioner.
So first of all, obviously that's a frightening incident to have something stolen from you in that way, regardless of the level of force used. That's frightening. So that's the sort of operations that our local policing teams are doing to reduce that. As I said, these offences are down in total by about 18% so far this year. Of course, statistics show that we're succeeding overall. That doesn't help the individual victim who's upset and frightened by that case. CCTV can make a difference. Some Westminster Council have disinvested in CCTV over the last few years, and they're looking to turn that round at the moment now, and that will help us. We're also using technology like facial recognition cameras to capture offenders. But these offences are frightening. That's why we've got 500 more officers in neighbourhoods tackling all these crimes that upset people. And, of course, we know there's been a growth in phone robberies in big cities across Europe. And we've been working hard on that. We want the technology companies to help us to make the phones less attractive.
But to Selena Scott's particular case, and you might have seen her first-person piece in one of the newspapers on Sunday, she writes, "I resolved to find a police officer, but despite walking up and down some of London's busiest central areas, down Jermyn Street, along Piccadilly and over to Leicester Square, I saw none. West End Central Police Station, which would have been a 10-minute walk away, had closed permanently in 2021 after being sold to developers for a reported £50 million. Isn't that what a lot of Londoners feel? Now, you're going to quote numbers that says the opposite, but there is a sense that the police aren't there when they need them, Sir Mark.
So the sale of police stations is something that's been going on for a decade. Frankly, I think it's gone too far. I've said that publicly. Are you surprised she didn't find an officer, Jermyn Street, Leicester Square, Piccadilly, on the beat, as it were? There will have been some officers. It's unfortunate we didn't manage to get one to her and she didn't bump into one. Maybe there were ways we could have given her a better service. The sale of police stations is a sad reality of modern policing, that we've had to balance the books in that way. But the reason that we started with where we did, Nick, about people, local officers fighting local crime, is exactly about this sort of issue. That's why we've got 500 more people on the streets tackling issues. Right. That's why we're succeeding in reducing crime in those areas. That doesn't mean we're reducing every awful story, and I can feel for her. She's obviously very upset. She's a 70-odd-year-old lady who had a very frightening experience, and that's not.
Well, lastly, one police station that is still open, as you'll be aware, is Hammersmith. Lastly on this, Selena Scott says, "The next day I received a call to say that officers from Hammersmith Police Station would come to take a statement from me at 8 a.m. the following day. But the time they were due to arrive, they rang to say they couldn't come because they couldn't find an available police car." We haven't got vehicles, Sir Mark. What is going on here?
Yeah, she hasn't had the best service. I'm not saying she has.
You tell a woman of 74 will come round and take a step. Sorry, we can't come round. Can't you get an Uber?
So the officers weren't able to give her the service that we would expect on that day.
Well, what do you say to that?
I'm sorry about that. Of course we're sorry about it.
All right, let's go to other calls. Shane's in Cardiff. Shane, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Yes, Shane.
My question is about Carnival. Now, after listening to everything I've just heard about the lack of policing and funding, I do wonder what going forward the police have for Notting Hill Carnival 2025.
You're a fan of Carnival, are you, sir?
Yes, I've been going for shy of 2 decades now.
Well done. Why do you enjoy it so much before I hand over to the Commissioner?
Well, first and foremost, it's the cheapest day out in London, 30 quid, drink, a bit of jerk, and it's a free party for 8 hours.
A bit of chicken and a decent drink, well, as long as you drink responsibly. Shane, let's get over to the Commissioner. Remind you, of course, it was reported earlier this month, the future of the Carnival could be in doubt without urgent funding from the government. Now, that's nothing to do with Sir Mark, but the policing of it is.
The policing is, so we put about 7,000 officers out on each day. It's a massive, massive event. One of the reasons we end up doing that is because the organisers, they're really good people, but this event has grown beyond their capacity to manage it safely. And there was a letter published, I think, last week or the week before from the leader of the organising committee asking the government for money to help run it safely. There's been an independent report on the safety of the event. And you'll have probably had yourself sometimes maybe some sort of worrying crowd crush incidents that you might have been part of. The stewarding and the sort of management of it needs a bigger security presence. I don't mean policing, I mean in terms of stewards. And the organisers, who are really good people, need the support to be able to do it properly to keep everyone safe so they can enjoy that event.
So what does that support look like, Commissioner?
So I think they were asking for around £2 million to be able to do that properly on the back of this independent report, which has highlighted the safety concerns that we've raised. And from a policing perspective, that's for the organisers and politicians to sort out. But from our perspective, we don't enjoy trying to rescue the safety because you can't fix an event where the safety is at risk. You can only sort of mitigate it. You can't fix it. And frankly, we want to fix our attention on the small number of people who come along to commit crime. And we saw 2 murders last year. There are hundreds of thousands of good people who come along to enjoy themselves, like yourself.
Like Shane, yeah.
And then there's tens of people who come along with weapons, and if we can focus on them, we can keep people safe from crime. But the organisers need all the support in the world to help run this massive event safely.
Does it need to go somewhere else? Has it outgrown those rather... You'll know the streets as well as I do,
yes.
Those rather narrow streets of Notting Hill. Do you think it's rather outgrown that, Sir Mark?
That's not for me to say. I think the thing is it's not got the resources it needs, and that's about... and it's it's great that Ian Comfort, the leader of the organising committee, has written to government. It's great that he's accepted the review's finding about safety, and he wants to run a professional event. He's a really good guy. He needs the support to do it.
But the men and women who serve under you won't need reminding, Commissioner. 61 were injured last year, 59 the year before that, 60 in 2022, so that's an average of 60 of your men and women. In 2024, a police officer was, quote, punched so hard in the jaw I was knocked out and couldn't chew for weeks. In 2023, a police officer was sexually assaulted from behind as she was policing a large group of people. In the same year, 6 of your officers were bitten. I mean, I know you're not knowing it, but these very brave men and women, they're being put in harm's way. Something needs to be done.
So some of the criminals who turn up to this event, so I must stress, hundreds of thousands of good people, tens of criminals. The criminals who turn up to this event are really violent and very difficult. And frankly, fighting crime in a confined area where the crowds are so crushed is doubly difficult. If the organisers were given the resources to run it better, we'd be able to do a better job fighting crime and our officers would be at less risk.
Shane, enjoy the Carnival.
Shane, enjoy the next Carnival. Might see you there.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Martin in Heckfield, you're on the radio. Go ahead, sir. Your question.
Yes, good morning, sir. I'm ex-job. Joined in the 70s and worked right through to the 2000s. Very proud to have been there, etc. However, my question to you is, do you think the Met has become more politicised over the years? And the second question is, when a crime is committed by ethnic minority, are we afraid to call it out for fear of us being accused of racism?
Well, this is very much what the Casey review of Commissioner, which of course you will recall, needs to be said. It was police forces such as West Yorkshire and Greater Manchester. It wasn't the Met, but there was a fear that decisions were taken sometimes in the wrong fashion because it was worried that it could cause a degree of racial disharmony. So, Mark,
what was the first part of the question? I've just
the first part of the question coming back to you, Martin.
First part of the question is: do you think the Met has become more politicised over the years, far more than it was certainly when I was in the job?
The politicisation of the Met and then the Casey review.
So I think all public services get more politicised in public debate. I think that my job as a Chief Constable in the past and as Commissioner now is to keep clear blue water between political opinion and operational decisions. We make independent operational decisions. The way that interface takes place with the Home Secretary and Mayor, and I speak to them both regularly, they publish plans. It's our job to take account of those plans, but we have independence to decide on the course of action that we're taking. And that's up to us to be robust about maintaining that independence, whilst, of course, reflecting on the direction set by politicians because they're elected, and that's quite proper. But I think that there is a danger that sometimes, if we're not careful, that policing can get politicised if leaders aren't strong and clear about that independence. And the second part of your question...
What did you take from the Casey review? Again, I say this is not directed at the Met, but other forces, and I think it's fair to say some of the forces need to look to themselves as to how potential crimes are investigated. I don't think that's unfair, is it?
Yeah, no, I think it looked at sort of Manchester and West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire particularly, and sort of the history in those forces, and it found conclusions about, but it wasn't just about policing, it was about local authorities and about how the whole system worked when you've got vulnerable people, often frequently going missing, who are at risk of exploitation, and how the system dealt with that, and it clearly was woefully inadequate. And Louise
Can you assure my listeners, no officer serving under you would take a decision because they didn't want to upset some ethnic or racial group? They go where they evidence.
If it's illegal, we go after it with equal vigour, whether you're sort of black, brown, white, male, female. We have to go after it with equal vigour. That anything else other than that leads to sort of division and tension, and eventually leads to problems such as the one we've seen. I mean, in terms of exploitation of children in London, we see a lot of criminal exploitation around drugs and gangs, and we do a lot of work on that. So our work on county lines and city lines, you have men of violence running drugs networks, often grooming children, who are then running the drugs for them, and we intervene with those. We rescue those children, put them into children's services, and we prosecute the men running them, sometimes for slavery offences.
OK. Last minute or so together, I'm going to take a couple of questions myself, if I may. Earlier in the year, the Daily Mirror did an investigation into the murder of Jill Dando, and they claim that they've unveiled evidence that points to a particular operative, Milorad Ulamek, who was a leading member of Dragan Filipic's gang and could have been responsible. When contacting the Metropolitan Police, they were told that this is no longer in an active phase of investigation. The Mirror says it has 2 eyewitnesses as well. Will this mean they'll reopen the case?
I haven't seen that report, so I'm not going to freewheel on that, Nick. Most of our murder capabilities focused on today's cases. We're reducing murder year on year. It's down by about 10 from last year to this year.
But if the Mirror has these 2 eyewitnesses, they're naming Milorad Ulamek, who worked for Dragan Filipovic, as part of the Serbian security services. Is that something that could interest the Met?
If there was genuinely new evidence that made a case solvable on any historic murder, we will look at it. Often journalists draw something up that is creative, maybe a representation of something that was already known. So it's not always as new as a newspaper will present. I don't know the detail on that case, so I can't comment.
Lastly, I think you will know the detail on this. Earlier this month, the Met said Londoners, and I quote, will be as outraged as we are at the utter waste of public funds after a disciplinary process of one of its senior officers took almost 5 years. Commissioner, how many men and women are still being paid by the Met, but they can't do frontline duties, or they might even be at home in the garden?
That case is a singular case which was spun out through all sorts of legal appeals, and it's massively frustrating. I inherited that case, and it's taken another couple of years to get rid of him. It's a senior officer who refused a random drugs test, and he should have been sacked in the first few weeks rather than here we were 5 years later. We are working through our misconduct cases as quickly as possible, because if an officer is suspended or restricted, what history shows is about once they go into a gross misconduct hearing, about 75 or 80% of them lose the job, but 25% of them it's found not proven. So whether this is somebody who shouldn't be a police officer and is about to lose their job, you want to do it really quickly. If it's somebody actually who's innocent and that process needs to be finished, you want them back on the streets as quickly as possible. So we're accelerating the timelines to be able to do that.
How many officers are there you're currently trying to work through? Are we talking dozens, scores, hundreds?
It's certainly in the tens, but I can't remember the exact number.
Finally, tensions in the Middle East. People obviously have concerns here in the UK. At times like this, politicians and senior officers often talk about vigilance. People need to be aware, don't they, at a time like this, that there are, unfortunately, people with evil in their heart who could be operating or seek to operate in this country.
Absolutely. And we all know and love London. It's a vibrant city. It's globally connected. What that also means for us is... Sorry, I knocked the mic then. What that also means for us is that events across the world play out on the streets of London. So over the last days and weeks, and particularly intensely over the last few days, we're again sort of back in contact with key communities, Jewish communities, Muslim communities, Iranian communities, Palestinian communities, people who are linked to this and have different fears and concerns. And we're in touch with that. We're also giving advice in terms of people's vigilance and how they look after themselves at a time like this when somebody may be provoked into some sort of action. And we've talked earlier on about state threats and all the complexity of that. But let's finish where we started.
I was going to say, final word on Operation Cuff, the initiative you had there, and Met Engage.
And so we've got more officers on the streets of London, in your community, fighting the crimes that matter where you are. That may be shoplifting in your town centre, that may be vehicle crime, that may be phone theft, such as the case we heard from Selena Scott. That's why we're arresting more than 1,000 more people every month than we were a year ago. That's why crime in your area is down by 18% on average across the country. And where we're really good at spotting the prolific offenders, such as Operation Cuff or Operation Orpington, we capture a few prolific offenders, and that can take 60, 70 or 80% out of the crime. That's what we're doing for you. If you want to connect to us and understand what's going on and shape our operations, please log on to Met Engage. Thanks, Nick.
Grateful for your time. Good luck to the men and women serving under you. Thanks for what you do. So Mark Rowley, Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police. The 8:30 news on LBC is next.
The UK has welcomed the agreement of a ceasefire between Iran and Israel following their 12-day conflict. Both countries have signed up to a truce proposed by President Trump. The head of the Metropolitan Police has told LBC that Iran represents a significant threat to UK security. So Mark Rowley, who's just been speaking to Nick, says there has been a steady flow of plots in the last 2 years.